Chapter 12. Selecting the Jury in Rockford. Our motorcade arrived in Rockford at 1 in the morning. We entered the jail structure through an underground garage. Even in the middle of the night, even in Rockford, where Garippo decided there wasn't much interest, a crowd gathered to get a first-hand view of the curiosity. Most people, I think, would not have recognized me on the street without all the pomp and ceremony that surrounded my every move. After some paperwork affected my official transfer into the custody of the Winnebago County Sheriff, I was taken to an isolated medical area, which was to be my home during the jury selection. The building wasn't called a jail. It was euphemistically known as the Winnebago County Public Safety Building of Rockford. The jail was on the top floor and conveniently adjoined the new courts building. At no time would I come in contact with other prisoners. No officers other than those assigned to me were allowed in that area. 2 officers would sit 24 hours a day on the other side of a 3x5 double-thickness glass window, which incorporated a built-in screen speaker. There was a radio and television set similar to those found in any hospital. The first person to visit me was the warden, who gave me a list of the rules and went over the ones which applied to me. There weren't many, as my movements were expectedly restricted. I was allowed to shower and shave each day, and a barber would come in on Sunday evening before the jury selection started. I was introduced to the officers who would be on guard duty. I asked if I were to be isolated the entire time or if there would be someone to talk with. If any of the officers wanted to talk, he said they could come into the room. Another room was set aside where I would dress. My suits and outer clothing were kept there. The Monday Morning Tribune wasted no time letting the people of Rockford know that I had arrived. Gacy arrives in Rockford appeared in the center of the front page alongside a 5x7 picture of me and the back seat of the sheriff's station wagon. Early Monday morning after breakfast, I showered, shaved, and received my necessary medication. Sheriff Donald Gasparin appeared with 2 plainclothes officers to brief me on how security would be carried out. While uniformed officers would be visible outside the courtroom, 4 undercover officers would be dispensed among the crowd inside. 2 more were stationed close to me, one standing against the wall behind me and one sitting in the first row closest to me. These 2 men were the ones I should follow if violence erupted. Access was tight to the 3rd floor, and the public had to enter through a metal detector. Amirani and Mata had met with me on Sunday to discuss their plans and to speculate on how things might go for us in Rockford, so there wasn't much left to rehash during our chat prior to their escorting me to the courtroom. "It's time to leave for the courthouse," the warden said as he entered my room. The sheriff told me politely that he had to put handcuffs on me for the walk, but that he would take them off as soon as we got there. It was almost as if he were courteously asking my permission. When we arrived, I took a seat in a small room down the hall from the courtroom. There was one 10-foot section of the corridor where I would have to walk where the public could see me up close. That worried the police. It was a hazard. So many threats of my life had been received since my arrest. While to the police that 10-foot walk represented danger, to me it was an abject embarrassment. I had come to despise the grotesquerie of the public's gawking eyes and rabid faces, globs bobbing in space for a glimpse of history in the guise of a ghoul. They gathered about me like parasites, separated by impossible inches from bleeding fresh meat. I felt like condescending to inimical growls to accommodate their imaginations with mimicry of a harried beast. Amirani and Mata were primarily concerned with my health after receiving reports that my blood pressure was down and I was having nosebleeds and some dizziness. A nurse was assigned to the judge's chambers in case I needed medical attention. It was 10:30 when we walked into the courtroom, going directly to sit at the defense table. I spotted the security officer that I knew sitting in the front row by the gate. Behind us in the gallery there was a rumble of voices, rumors being confirmed or refuted, curiosity satisfied. The bailiff called the court to order. After Judge Garippo made some opening remarks and addressed the gallery with a demand for decorum, he told the bailiff to summon the first group of prospective jurors. They sat in the first 3 rows, and he asked general questions of each. Their availability of time, as the trial in Chicago was expected to last 6 to 8 weeks. Had they formed their opinions as a result of press releases? Would health problems prevent them from serving? Were they related to anyone participating in the trial? He asked those with problems or objections to remain standing so that he could discuss their reluctance with them individually. 24 of them were dismissed because of family, job, or health reasons. 76 remained when he came to his second advice. The jury will be selected here in Winnebago County. After that time, they'll be allowed to go to their homes until the trial starts. Once the trial starts, the jurors will be transported to Chicago, where they'll remain for the duration of the trial. During that time, 6 days a week, we'll be working long hours. On the 7th day, arrangements have been made so you might visit with your family and friends. Will any of this cause an undue hardship to you? Of those 76 persons, the judge excused 36 more for family or job obligations. The 40 that remained were taken into another room and brought out individually to be asked more limiting questions. The prosecution and defense teams were not permitted to question prospective jurors directly. If they wanted additional information to clarify a point, they had to ask the judge to intervene. Some of the potential jurors didn't know what sequestering meant, that they might be hermetically sealed from the public. Amirani asked to be allowed to explain, but Garippo rejected the request. The next prospective juror challenged the judge's rejection. Back up and explain what you meant by that. You would have thought Amirani had planted in there. Amirani addressed the judge. I want them to know what they're in for. What do you want me to tell them? That they're going to hang by their fingernails? Laughter broke up the courtroom. With that, Garippo ordered a recess. In the bullpen for a cup of coffee, one officer asked me if I knew what all the mumbling was about when we first entered the courtroom. Most of the people couldn't tell which one was me and were asking each other. Some said I looked like an attorney and that they must be waiting until later to bring me out. I was wearing a 3-piece suit, just as were the attorneys. How would the people know the difference? The only perception they had of me was from the picture the newspapers always printed. The one taken of me at the Des Plaines police station when I was exhausted from 2 days without sleep, drugged, unshaven, sick, and puffy. So maybe they were looking for some Neanderthal walking on his knuckles. Not much of what I'm saying is based on my memory. From day one, I took notes during the proceeding, some objective, some subjective. I did that just to occupy myself. Nobody knew what I was doing. The attorneys were making notes as well. During that first morning, 4 of the required 16 jurors were selected. When 4 jurors are picked, it is called a panel. Each of the 4 must be approved by both sides before moving on to considering those for another panel. There were to be 4 panels of 4 jurors, each to constitute a full jury. We broke for lunch until 1:30. The afternoon session seemed dull compared to the morning. Judge Garippo continued to question potential jurors one at a time. Amirani would regularly object on the grounds the questions were not specific enough, and that there should be explanations when a candidate didn't fully answer a question. 2 more were picked during the afternoon, and at 4:55 Judge Garippo adjourned for the day, telling the remaining candidates to return in the morning. Of the first 100 prospective jurors called, 6 were picked in just 4 hours and 17 minutes of actual courtroom time. Garippo was certainly sticking to his promise of picking the jury in a week. It seemed we were moving awfully fast for such an important procedure. The newspapers recapped the day's events with thoroughness, right down to the questions asked, my reaction to some of the answers, and my attire. Since it wasn't an exceptionally momentous day and they had to write something, they wrote with fashion. I wore loafer-type shoes because shoestrings were prohibited for obvious reasons. So when I wore loafers with a 3-piece suit, they decided it was important enough to help fill the space. Outside the courtroom, a reporter asked some of the people coming out what they thought. Gacy impressed me as being cold and calm, with no remorse evident in his facial expressions. Gacy's physical appearance was such that he could be mistaken for a dentist or a minister. I don't know if he's insane, but he's certainly not playing with a full deck. I think it would be hard for him to get an impartial jury. Maybe they should have taken the trial clear out of the state. The next morning was just like Monday, except I didn't bother to get up for breakfast. A nurse woke me at 8:30 to take my blood pressure and pulse and give me my medication. After a shower, I dressed in a different suit, along with black shoes with shoelaces, just to prove wrong some vague idea the media had given the public. My lawyer stopped by the holding room on the way to court and indicated that they were satisfied with the jurors selected the day before. I didn't know how they could be. Sam, those people should all be arrested for perjury for lying under oath. They took the stand and claimed they hadn't heard about my case. How in the hell can they come out with that when I have been in every newspaper available to them, every radio and television station in the area? Who actually believes they never heard about me? Came the standard answer. Trust us, and don't worry about it. Then there were the judge's inflammatory questions regarding homosexuality, indicating that such a lifestyle might become a vital consideration in the trial. He inquired of those men and women if they felt that if a defendant they were to judge was homosexual, would that create a bias in their thinking? That remark seemed to present a foregone conclusion. These days, homosexuals are not afraid openly to declare themselves such. If I had been one, I would have done so long before. But the fact is, I'm not. And when Garippo suggested I was, he was damaging my case, especially inasmuch as the jury was being selected in a smaller city where homosexuality would be viewed with a more provincial attitude. I felt that Garippo had caricaturized me falsely, prejudiciously imprinting homosexuality on the candidates' minds. I had by then lost all respect for the law. All the state seemed interested in was whether the jurors were in favor of the death penalty and if they would mandate it in the event that I was found guilty. During the Tuesday morning session, Amirani seemed to muster some backbone after I had clearly expressed my dissatisfaction with the way things were going. They kicked up more objections to the line of questioning Garippo was using. Some prospective jurors were dismissed when they said they had already made up their minds that I was guilty. Amazing. Some honest people. Seeing as they were located on his property, evidently, he did it. A few were excused when they voiced negative opinions on the use of the insanity plea. There were some who were excused by the state. A heavy-set woman who appeared to be in her 60s said, "I cannot sign a statement sentencing Gacy to death if he were found guilty. I'm a Christian. God forgives, and we have to forgive." Garippo tried to rehabilitate her, saying, "Could you imagine any case where you would sign a warrant sentencing someone to death?" "No. I wouldn't have no imagination on it." She was excused by Garippo for cause. Amirani accused Garippo of trying to change the woman's mind with this form of questioning, saying, "There's no way we can get a fair, impartial jury." Another time he said, "The state's trying to get a hanging jury." By the end of the day, no one had been impaneled. The total time in court was 5 hours, 22 minutes. During the afternoon, the proceeding was stalled because of an aggressive man in the audience. We were out 15 minutes while the police removed him. Before adjourning, Garippo gave a speech to the reporters in the gallery. "The media have a First Amendment right to freedom of the press," he said. "But the defendant is also guaranteed a fair trial by the Bill of Rights." He asked the media representatives not to relay specific questions that he asked the prospective jurors. Their detailing that kind of question could give rise to difficulty in selecting a jury if the process takes a number of days. A lot of good it did. The cat was already out of the bag, and those eager people waiting to be called had to have read the newspapers, formulating their answers if they were called upon. That evening in my cell, I refused my dinner, some kind of rare chicken stew. Sheriff Gasparin stopped by and we talked a while. I asked if he had any opinion on me playing cards with my guards. He decided that since I was in such a secluded area, he would allow it. He stopped by most nights to check on how I was and to see if I had any questions regarding security at the courthouse. He had heard about the rowdy incident during that day's session. I told him how quickly his men reacted and that I was grateful. I never knew exactly what happened. The officer behind me told me to get up quickly and go out the door. It seemed odd to me that not one word of the event ever appeared in the newspaper. After he left, the two officers said they were surprised that I had gotten permission for us to play pinochle. They had been reluctant to talk, reluctant to ask. Who would have thought he would let us play cards on duty? We played until their relief came on at midnight. They told me how the other men envied them, this detail, because it kept them off the wintry street. My dislike for cops lessened while I was in Rockford. In Chicago, it thrived. On Wednesday, January 30th, we were to spend the third day of jury selection. When we arrived at the courtroom bullpen, the attorneys looked haggard after a night on the town. I was angry as a hornet when I learned that my lawyers would go out for dinner and drinks with the state's gang. I realized that true professionals could be business adversaries and friends at the same time. But the law is a strange battlefield. So much give and take, so much compromise. I got an ominous feeling whenever Amirani and Sullivan shared a table and a jug. We started that day with the largest group of prospective jurors yet. 150 were brought in at one time, completely filling the first 5 rows of the gallery. Garippo again started with those vacuous general questions. By the time he got through the 4th question, 107 had been dismissed, for reasons of health or job, because they had strong aversions to being sequestered, or for family reasons. The remaining 43 were taken into a side room and were called out one at a time. Amirani had used 8 discretionary challenges. The state had used 6, and Garippo had dismissed 8 potentials himself, deciding they couldn't be impartial. Some intended jurors expressed reservations about the legitimacy of the insanity plea. They were quickly dismissed. One woman said, "Generally, I think it's a bad provision. I feel a lot of people get away with things because of the insanity defense." Out of 600,000 criminal cases in 1 year in the United States, less than 3% used the insanity defense. Less than 1% were successful with it. I don't support the insanity defense because of potential abuse and for personal reasons, but certainly not because of overuse. The notoriety it has received has come about only because it was used in some recent cases of widespread publicity. During the afternoon session, Mana and I noticed that, as each prospective juror took the stand, the local Winnebago County prosecutor, along with his assistants, brought in files for the state's team to work from. With the assistance of these files, it seemed that they were able to ask questions which indicated they had extensive reports on each person. Amirani objected. The state had information helpful to its cause which had not been disclosed during discovery and was therefore unfairly secreted from us. Kunkel claimed that the information they had was taken off the voter registration list and that the defense could have had the same information if we'd come to town earlier. But the fact was that they were being provided with critical information by the Brotherhood of local prosecutors who had access to county recorder office files and criminal files, along with the staff to do the work. Even if defense investigators had been in Rockford, it would have taken weeks to do the same job. Garippo surprised us by saying that certain information had to be shared, but already those records had given them a tremendous edge. It was easy to see how systematically the state had removed prospects from consideration. One woman in her mid-20s openly lived with her boyfriend. The state dismissed her. She had to be too liberal. Another unacceptable woman was a registered nurse who worked in a hospital which had a unit for the mentally ill. The state must have feared that she might be sympathetic toward mental illness. Minorities didn't fit the state's mold of a good juror either. The 3 blacks and 1 Hispanic were dismissed. It seemed that the state would accept only middle-class whites, family-type people who believe in the death penalty. It was like asking 5 quick questions. Do you mind being locked away from your family for 6 or 8 weeks? Yes? You're out. No? Go on to the next question. Can you follow the court's instructions on the insanity defense? No? You're out. Yes? Go on to the next question. Would you sign a statement sentencing a person to death? No? You're out. Yes? Go on to the next question. Do you object to homosexuality? No? You're out. Yes? Go on to the last question. Are you liberal or conservative? Liberal? You're out. Conservative? You're on the John Wayne Gacy jury. Judge Garippo adjourned the day's sessions at 5:17, after only 4 hours and 10 minutes. 2 additional jurors had been accepted, completing the second panel of 4. On Thursday, Garippo wanted to start earlier than the first 3 days, and we arrived in the courtroom at 9:45. Again, the potential jurors were confused by the judge's questions, which were too general, and they weren't satisfied to give one-dimensional replies. One man said, "He's guilty from the word go." He was dismissed. I had to laugh because he wasn't answering a question, just reflecting the media propaganda. He knew nothing more He knew nothing about me or the case, but he had made up his mind on the basis of the image created in gruesome portion by the newsboys. I hated the press, not him. A tiny black lady with gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses was asked if she could support the death penalty if the defendant were found guilty as charged. She came back with, "No way!" He asked her again. Wouldn't she follow the judge's instructions? "No, sir. God didn't give us the right to take another person's life, and I'll have no part in it." The judge excused her. Even he had to smile as she adamantly strode off. By the end of the day, 4 more jurors were picked, and 4 alternates were impaneled. Judge Garippo adjourned the proceeding at 5:30, stating that the trial would begin on Wednesday, February 6th, at 10 o'clock in Chicago. Court was in session 4 hours and 24 minutes that day. The jury was made up of 7 men and 5 women, ranging in age from 21 to 71. The alternatives were 2 men and 2 women. All 16 came from a working-class background. All were white. 11 were Protestant, none were Catholic. While I wasn't happy with the jurors selected and thought we had been rushed through the process, both Emirani and Mata acted pleased and made it sound like things were going our way. How they could think that was beyond me. The total time spent in the courtroom to pick the jury of 12 regulars and 4 alternates was 18 hours and 13 minutes. They sifted through 250 prospective jurors. 167 were routinely excused. From the remaining 83, 16 were to be accepted for the trial. That breaks down to 4 minutes given to the scrutiny for acceptance or dismissal of each prospective juror in a trial that comprised proportions unexceeded in American trial history. The National Jury Survey Project and the American Bar Association say that in a trial by jury on a capital murder charge or in any major criminal case, the questioning of each prospective juror should take between 2 and 3 hours in order to find how that person is thinking. That didn't seem to bother Judge Garippo and his stand about a defendant's rights being guaranteed under the Bill of Rights. In retrospect, it was ominous that not one jury member had a college degree. It proved detrimental to our defense. Tangled skeins of psychological terms presented an overwhelming problem even for those with higher educations. My attorneys' minds became boggled. I watched Judge Garippo strain to appear to comprehend. A futile performance as he squirmed on his seat beneath knitted brows. It was just too abstruse, too complex, too cosmic for common understanding. I don't low-rate anyone, but it is a sarcastic paradox that the marrow argument for the defense went undeciphered. On Friday, February 1st, I packed up and was driven back to Cook County's Sir Mac Hospital by members of Winnebago's Sheriff's Department. With only 2 cars, it took 1 hour and 40 minutes. The horses were readying to enter the starting gate.